And today I am with my good friend Christian Holthausen, who's in Paris. He's an American Frenchman, and he is specialized in communication, and he knows the Champagne region really, really well. So, Christian, say a little bit about yourself, say who you are, and, basically, what is your experience with Champagne?
Well, first of all, Caroline, thank you very much for having me on. We have indeed been good friends for a very, very, very long time. So I am Franco-American. I started working in Champagne in 1999. I started my career working at Champagne Veuve Clicquot. I finished a master's in comparative literature and thought I was going to do a doctorate in comparative literature, and then basically ended up working like in Champagne. Started off as a marketing assistant, having no idea what I was doing. And then Champagne just bit me, and I fell in love with it. And so now it's been, 25 years that I've been working in Champagne. So I've had the privilege of working for a lot of really beautiful houses in Champagne and in other parts of France and in other parts of the world. And yeah, I mean, I think Champagne finds you.
Champagne finds you. Okay.
Mm,
So, how do we find more people quickly?
mm,
Basically, there's so many things. I think champagne is so many different little elements. And when I worked in wine, when I not champagne, it was I was selling New Zealand Sauvignon. It was very important to have a story because
mm.
we always said that people buy into the story. So in your experience with champagne, how have you worked with a story? Because if there's one thing we can say about champagne is that it has a fantastic story.
It does have a fantastic story. I think the story is changing. I mean, when I started in Champagne, 25 years ago, the story was very much about sort of what happened in the 18th century, what happened in the 19th century, and we had a tendency to talk about a house style, a blend. We had a tendency to talk about caviar and champagne and members of the royal family. And we didn't actually look at the vineyards, and people that would come to Champagne didn't actually ever go to the vineyards. I mean, the journalists and sommeliers and buyers, they would come and they would come to one of the houses and they would basically just talk about the wine, but they wouldn't necessarily talk about champagne. And I think what's changing now is that, when people come to Champagne now, they want to ask very different questions. How do you farm? How are you making the wines? What exactly are you doing to prevent X, Y, and Z? Are men and women paid the same thing? What's going on here? What's going here? And the questions are very, very sort of different. And I think that a lot of the Champenois are being challenged to sort of reinvent themselves in a lot of ways. The other thing that I think is really important at this moment in terms of the way that stories are told is that I'm seeing a lot of coalitions being formed. I hate false dichotomies. It's like the thing that I hate the most. This whole idea of Bordeaux versus Napa or Champagne versus English sparkling or this versus this. I think today what consumers are looking for is good producers that farm correctly, that blend correctly, that have strong values, that have strong convictions, and they basically find each other. And this whole idea of X versus Y, I don't think it necessarily exists anymore. I think a consumer in Brussels, a consumer in Tokyo, a consumer in Auckland, a consumer in Sao Paulo, I think they can drink like champagne on Monday and Prosecco on Tuesday and English sparkling on Wednesday and Cava on Thursday. And I think it's about working together to sort of find the great producer. So I think coalitions are really important. I also think that the storytelling has become much more. I don't know. I think it's become much more important to actually back up what you're saying. I think
Mhm.
the days in Champagne, and it's not just Champagne, and we've seen the same thing in many regions in the world. So it's not fair to single out Champagne. The glossy coffee table books of what we did like 200 years ago. I think no one's interested in that anymore. They want to actually be there. They want to be live. They want to ask like the actual questions and get real answers. And I think the fluffy side of the wine business and Champagne, we've been the king of wines and the wine of kings going back to the very beginning. I think that a lot of people in Champagne are making very, very strong changes and coming out and being real and being honest and sort of revealing like who they are. And I think for me, that's one of the most important things that's happened in the industry.
So the fact that people talk about their terroir, they talk about their way of farming.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like right up my street here. So, um, but at the same time, also, it's well, as people start to talk more about themselves, like in the olden days, when we look at the history and everything else,
Mm,
it's like a concept. The concept of champagne is put forward, as in people will drink champagne. It's not necessarily that important which champagne they drink, even though they have always had marketing. So if you go to, in the
mm.
19th century, they had like amazing campaigns actually, beginning of the 20th century as well. But it was almost like, if you couldn't get one champagne, you would get another champagne. Now you are
Yeah.
saying if you are looking for that, you are looking for a specific kind of wine, and it's more important how it's farmed, what the story is, how you treat your people. And if today that is champagne, that's great. But if they don't have that champagne in the shop, you can walk out with Corpinat, with Prosecco, with English sparkling, with Cava, with basically anything. Okay, is this what you are saying here?
I think that at the end of the day, as much as I love champagne as an appellation, I
Sorry.
think at the end of the day, it's about the fundamental values and convictions of each producer. And
Mm-hmm.
those producers can be anywhere in the world. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of comparing champagne versus like something else, I think that everyone in Champagne, in Bordeaux, in Piedmont, in the Willamette Valley, wherever you are in the world, I think that all of us have to sort of step up and,
Mm-hmm.
farm better and treat people better and actually are more transparent than we used to be,
Yeah.
and I think that the most important thing that everyone seems to be doing is forming coalitions. The thing that I love very much is that
Do you
the
mean
generation that's
coalitions? Sorry, I'm just because you said this is
mm,
before, so I just want to check. Do you mean coalitions across regions or coalitions within the regions or both?
both. I think
Okay.
coalitions within the region. I think coalitions across regions. I think it's fair to say that a lot of French people, certainly the generation of my parents, I mean, Champagne was the best, Bordeaux was the best, and there was not a lot of discussion of other
Mm-hmm.
things. Now, what I love about Champagne is that, in the last 10 years, so many of the winemakers in Champagne, from vigneron, from winemakers working at cooperatives, from chef de cave, they've all gone off and they've actually made a vintage in Australia. They've made a vintage
Mm.
in California. They've made a vintage in other parts of the world. And I think that that's really important because you see that people are traveling and they're learning new things. In the face of climate change where we are now, I think that the people that have actually taken the time to go off and actually do a vintage in other parts of the world, to study in other parts of the world, have been quite good because obviously for many centuries it was sort of like we're the best, but there wasn't a lot of like exposure to like other places. And so I think that there's a certain sense of openness now that is actually helping not only Champagne but also helping like all wine regions, that
Mm-hmm.
there's an exchange now. And I think coalitions are important. It's all about people working together across the world, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with that. Um, I was just wondering. Obviously, the model you describe is the model I knew before I came to Champagne. Obviously, I
Mm,
worked in the New World, and everybody went to France. At least once to France in a major wine region, and then they went to other places. I do want to go back to what you said before, because actually, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago only, um, somebody told me that the fact that the Champenois go everywhere, that this actually has, is starting to bite them, in the bum a bit, because they are bringing their expertise, which is now copied better by the other countries sometimes, or by the other wine regions sometimes.
mm.
And I remember when the person said this, it was a bit, my dad used to always say that when he was an engineer, and he said, in Japan, they need to different things, but when they understand the way the technology works, they are better at copying it and improving it than we are here, obviously in those days. So maybe is a similar thing. What is your opinion about that?
I mean, I think that we can all learn from each other. So
Mhm.
I know that historically the French wine regions, were always sort of considered to be the best,
Okay,
and they
yes,
were
yes.
sort of going up. But the thing is that I think that a lot of people that leave France or Spain or Italy or Portugal or Germany, or not only the old world and the new world, but also the
Mhm.
ancient world. Like I think people in Syria, people in Lebanon, I mean, people in Georgia, like people that have been making wine for so long. I think that as much as we can do to share best practices. I mean, I think a lot of French winemakers have gone to that part of the Middle East and actually learned, like, ancestral methods, and you see
Mhm.
how concrete eggs have become like such a big thing like
Yes.
all over the world now, and a lot of that has to do with those visits there. And if the Europeans traveling to parts of the United States or parts of Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, etc., has helped them. I mean, at the end of the day, like, as long as we're all making better wines and we're all doing like better stuff together, my favorite thing is I feel like if everyone wins, we all win.
Yes.
And I think that's really, 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 like, important. We're all learning from each other.
No, I do agree with you. We're not it's not like a huge competition, and it's like, for instance, something I saw, or I heard at Roedra when I was tasting the Vin Clair of 2025, which was a hot year, actually
Yeah.
a cool year compared to this one, but it was a hot year anyway. And how Jean-Baptiste was saying, well, we learned from our experiences in California
Yeah.
because they are there, and they said, we know that when it starts to ripen it will go very quickly, so we will need to go earlier. So so obviously some people are taking this into consideration. So when we tell a story,
Mm.
what parts would you highlight in that story? What do you think is important? What do consumers, importers, distributors, because they're obviously the ones that going to repeat the story. What
Yeah.
would they want to know, and what is important? Is it authenticity, or is it, I don't know, a specific, I don't know, a golden cask that we have, or
Mm.
something like that?
I mean, I mean, storytelling it depends on, the ultimate person who's consuming the material. I do think though that what people want now more than ever is transparency. I think if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast, I think people can see through the bullshit much more than they used to be able to. I think the fact that people are connected. I mean, I even see here in Paris, the thing that's amazing is that um people speak, foreign languages much more than they did, when I
Mhm.
was a kid. People are open to, wines from other parts of the world. You go to cool wine bars like in the 11th and the 3rd arrondissement, and you have people that are so excited to drink wines from Greece, that are excited to drink wines from New Zealand. And that's a real cultural shift. So I think that because there's all this interconnectedness, and that people can find each other really, really easily. It used to be in the old days to find a journalist or an influencer, you had to have their phone number, you had to have a Rolodex, whereas now you can just find them like really, really easily. So people are so like interconnected that I think that the most important part of storytelling today is really raw, legitimate, like authenticity, because you can't hide behind things anymore. And I think
Mhm.
sort of the three Michelin starred, caviar lunch. Isn't necessarily like, enough to convince a journalist to write something. It's not necessarily enough to convince a importer distributor to import your wines, and it's not necessarily enough for the consumer. I think people want to have much more real information. I think there's been a split, and I mean, I have worked obviously in communications my whole career. I started my own company, Westbrook Marketing
Mhm.
Partners, 5 years ago, and I've always thought it was really important to make the split between press relations and public relations, because people always talk about PR and they think
Yeah,
it means like one certain thing.
I split them
Press
out
relations.
before. Yeah.
It's press relations is very, very specific. I think public relations is sort of connecting people together,
Mhm.
seeing how people can work well together. It could be, with sommeliers, it could be with consumers, it could be with other organizations that share like-minded values and like-minded ideas. I think that public relations is maybe even becoming more important than press relations, because press
Mhm.
relations has kind of been folded in. When you and I first met, I remember that one of the huge debates that was going on, and this is going back, like we've been friends for a long time, was this whole thing between, real journalists versus bloggers. And,
Yeah.
there was all this like debate over which was this. Well, the thing is that bloggers have become journalists, journalists have become bloggers, content creators have become PRs, PRs have become journalists. Like everything is changing. So I think that people need to be much more open to different things. It's not just like, 20 years ago, you would send out a press release and you would get coverage. The media landscape has changed a lot. I mean, when I started in the industry, there was one single person that had a weekly column in all the major papers. That business doesn't exist anymore.
Mhm.
You have the content creation thing, which has changed like a lot of the way that people, consume media. I mean, the amount of people, forget wine, that actually just consume news media uniquely through their social media channels is mind blowing. And the fact that people have been able to create these silos where basically now it's like, I don't even need to consume raw news. I just consume the news that I want to believe in, and I don't necessarily have to question anything. So in addition to that, on the media side, the wine side and, spirits, alcohol in general is having a moment. And I think that, the way that people consume, how they consume, when they consume is changing quite significantly. So it's a very interesting moment, I think, to be in our world because within the last couple of years, like many, many things are changing. And I think that the landscape is developing at such a rapid pace, and now you have AI like coming into like the
I was
entire
gonna ask
mix.
you about that.
It's
Yes.
wild, and you see things. I receive so many, releases and things from producers and people that want to collaborate and people that are thinking this, and I'm like, my God, it's just pure AI. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think the smart people are finding ways to sort of navigate between all of these different elements, but there's a lot. And the landscape is changing a lot. And I think people have to be more vigilant than they used to be. It used to be if you had X, Y, or Z's telephone number, before we even had mobile phones, you could kind of have contact with this person. Whereas now, like, people are connected everywhere. That's
Yeah.
very, very different. And that's in one generation.
I do understand that, but obviously, like I will talk to you as a PR, okay?
Mm,
Because you are a PR, and me as a member of the press. You, Christian, you know very well, are the only PR whose press releases I actually read.
that is true.
Sorry, um, and I think one of the big parts about that is because we do have a personal relationship.
Yeah.
We became. We are friends, but I think you, from what I've seen, with from other people is you seem to have that relationship with many people. I have seen people following you as you moved in your career. In a similar way, if I give another example from Champagne, for instance, the Salamaster Dominique de Marville, he
Mm,
changed a few times and we all followed. Okay. We went
he's
where
great.
Dominique went because we have a relationship with him. So
Mm,
in this time of AI, where all this content and all these things are uh, are coming in. Sorry, seems that the tourists in Uvile are rowdy. That we have all these things coming in. w- What is the importance of these relationships now? Is it still as important, or is it, can you just try and get something? You write something, you make a cool AI gimmicky, and then it will go round, and it's
no,
not really that important
I'm
to
50. I'm
invest
50.
in people.
I'm 52 years old. I feel like I still believe very, very strongly in relationships and I
Hmm.
think that they are important. And I do feel very fortunate that so many people have supported me and helped me and mentored me and nurtured me. And I also feel it's a real responsibility that I have to
Hmm.
support and help and nurture other people. And I really feel that um your partner, your family, your friends, your colleagues. You have to invest in those relationships. And if you invest in those relationships, people will invest in you. And then you all support each other and like help each other. The biggest thing I feel that maybe, I mean, we all have a lot of strengths and weaknesses, and I have a lot of weaknesses. But the one thing that I think that people can count on me for is that I'm very honest, sometimes blunt, but I will tell you the truth.
That's
And I
why I
also
like
think
it.
that it's good, and I also think that one of the big things is that, it's credibility. I mean, working, in very corporate jobs for a long time, and then going off on my own 5 years ago, to start my own company. And I work with amazing, clients in Champagne, in Chablis, in Bordeaux, in the New World. Like, I work with a lot of really cool people. But I think one of the things that I pride myself on is I only work with people where I actually believe in the people and I believe in the wines. Because I believe very strongly
Mhm.
that if I start pitching you or start pitching other people stories, and then you actually dig and you go, actually, these wines are shit. Actually, these people aren't very kind. Actually, I don't like the way they treat their people. Actually, they're jacking the soil full of herbicides and pesticides. Then all of a sudden, you're gonna be like, "What's happened to Christian? Like, I've lost
Mhm.
faith in him." And so, it's difficult, and I feel very privileged to be able to make these decisions. But sometimes I've had people that want to work with me, and I say, well, before we meet, before we work together, can we actually have a chat? And I go and visit the estate, and I basically interview them the exact way that a journalist will interview them, and I ask them all the questions, including like the questions that aren't pleasant, like, let's talk about this, let's talk about this, let's talk about this. And then, we taste the wines and I ask them, and then it has to be, I don't like the word transactional, but it has to be sort of like both sides need to feel that this is going to be a good thing. I also feel
A
very,
trust relationship, I think.
yeah, exactly.
It's
A
a
trust
relationship
relationship.
based on trust.
It has to be based on trust, and I also feel that one of the things that's, I'm very proud of, I'm not a proud person, but I feel like proud is that the winemakers that I work with, like, they really trust me, and I really trust them, and pretty much every winemaker I've ever worked with, like, we've legitimately become, like, good friends, and we can speak for each other and speak, like, about each other, and we really, like, support each other, and it feels much more, like, holistic, to me. So I think you nurture relationships, and those are really important, but also you support people. Like, sometimes I have journalists that will contact me and they'll say, "Hey, do you know anyone in this part of the world?" And it might be a region that I don't know anything about, or a winery I'm not even representing, but I'll say, "Listen, let me do some research for you." And then I'll come back to them and I'll say, "Listen, I mean, you're South African. I do not know very much about South African wines. I visited twice, but it's not an area of expertise. But if a journalist contacted me and I'm not working with anyone in South Africa, I would be able to find the information that they needed and say, listen, call this person, call this person, call this person." Not because I have anything to gain from it, other than that's just the right thing to do, is to be
Yes.
helpful. And in
No, no,
return, people look out for
it's
you.
no, no, I do understand that. I am very fortunate to write for a big magazine like Wine Searcher because it is a
Mm,
big magazine, and to have those kind of relationships very often when there's like some things that are not a huge story or that are, they are a huge story, but they're not necessarily a thing that I want to delve into. I will pass that information on, and everybody basically helps each other in the little group of writers that we are, which I think is a really nice thing because obviously we are all independent. And, you could say, oh, I'm pitching the story. Well, or I'm helping for the story, but I'm not going to be paid for it. But, I think that is really not important. I think what's more
mhm.
important is to have a good magazine where people, where you can trust the other people that write for it and that you can help them. And they can help you. It's just like you say, a holistic
It
relationship.
is. And
Mm.
in French, we say renvoyer l'ascenseur. It's like, sending the
Yes,
elevator back up.
back
And I
up.
love
Yeah.
this expression because, in Champagne, the three producers I'm working with now very closely, they're all situated for the most part on the Côte Blanc. And I had a journalist that contacted me last week and was looking for information specifically about the Côte d'Ivoire, which I think is one of the most exciting regions,
Regions.
like
Yeah.
in Champagne at the moment. And I said, okay, I don't work with anyone there at the moment, but let me put you in contact with certain people. These are the producers that I think are very cool. And it's not like I had any skin in the game, but I just think that that's the nice thing to do.
Mm.
And 6 months from now, if I reach out to this person about something else, they will help me and say, you know what, I don't think this is right for my particular column or my particular magazine, but here's someone that I
Yeah.
think you can help with. And I think what people have never really understood, I mean, you do, because we're part of the same world, but what a lot of people don't understand is they don't understand that, media, is all part of an ecosystem.
Yes.
And publicists and, writers, we all work together. And a lot of writers, are publicists, and a lot of publicists are writers, and we all are producing different stuff. And I think that the coalition, again, I keep coming back to this, but this idea of like supporting each other, we're all part of like a big ecosystem. In Champagne, to go back to Champagne, we're all part of the same ecosystem. I don't care if you're a grower or a house or a cooperative. I mean, I just want to know that you're cool and that you make good wines and that you care about your people and that you're invested in the future and you're invested in being as kind to the planet like as possible. Um, that's the most important thing. I think we have to really think of everything in terms of being an ecosystem. We all have to work together everywhere.
No, no, that's true. And here, there, once again, I am very lucky that the local journalists here, they very much accept me as a local person, even though obviously I
You are?
write in English. And when relationships are complicated, there's always one or another that sends me the information.
Mm.
Plus, also, sometimes I have stuff and they want it, or often it's people asking me to look at figures. I'm quite good at that. So
Oh, you bet.
I can do that quickly, and somebody else will give me something else. And I think it's true. It is an ecosystem, and that is I think that is important also to get these kind of messages out. Now there are two small points. I'm sorry, I am too honest as well, but I'm
No,
going to
no.
tell you this. Um, and you know me too well, so you know what I'm going to say anyway. So obviously, we're talking about being more ecological, kinder to the planet.
Mm.
This is something that Champagne is struggling with as a whole. There are a lot of producers that work really well, and often the appellation is hiding behind that smaller part. And those producers are in the three categories. So they are in the category of houses, cooperatives, and growers, if you want. And I feel very often when you say something, when I, for instance, say something, they say, oh, yeah, but 20 years ago it was a lot worse. Yes, but today's drinker is not the same drinker as the person that was there 20 years ago. And then the other thing is obviously the working with the people, how you treat other people as a whole. And Champagne has done a lot of work on that because we obviously had those horrible harvest experiences in 2023. But there are it is quite complicated in a way where when the economics go down as we are today, the sales have gone down. What happens is people are less likely to invest in things for their people. And I'm not saying everybody, there's a lot of growers that have been investing in, I don't know, special water bottles to keep you cool. I was reading an article about people in the Orb that bought these special towels to keep the
Mm.
people cool while they were working. Because obviously, we are working, sorry, Pixie came past. We are working in an environment that is changing, and so obviously the working conditions are changing, and we don't want people to die in the vineyard or to fall sick.
Yes.
But often this is a minority. How do you think could we, me as a member of the press and
Mm.
you as a PR who does public relationships as well as press relationships,
Mm.
and I'm more thinking of your public relations here, how
Yeah.
could we go about and try and push these changes a little bit more, that more people accept it, that more people believe, start to understand that when they give to others, it will come back tenfold,
Mm.
as they say in scripture, wherever,
Mhm.
I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I think that it's our responsibility to champion those producers that are actually doing things correctly. Because lots of producers, not just in Champagne, but I know we're
Yeah.
focusing on Champagne, say this isn't possible. And I always come back to them and I say, listen, here's a number of people that are actually doing it and actually making it work and then connecting them. I mean, there's so many people in Champagne now that are, powering their wineries, based on pure solar energy. And
Yes.
that's an investment, but it is possible. And I think, again, it's
And it's one
connecting
that pays
people and
off
saying,
today.
exactly, but it's exactly, but it's like, exactly, but it's like connecting people and saying like, this can make it work. Or some people say, I don't know if I could possibly farm this way. I don't think it would necessarily be, feasible for me or profitable for me. And I think that one of our jobs as people that, focus on, public relations, and you and I both speak to people like all the time. And I think we're good talkers. We're also really good listeners, is connecting people and saying, oh, you're struggling. You're putting copper in the soil and that's not giving you what you need. Let me introduce you to someone
Mm.
that had the exact same problem 6 years ago and
Yeah,
let me see what's going on here. And I think it's about connecting people, and the more we all sort of rise up, like then, things will change. I think there's a lot of like real hard, long established, they're not rules even, they're more like traditions.
they're
They're more like
traditions. Yeah.
customs. And it's sort of like, well, my great grandparents did it this way, so this is how I'm going to do it. And that's not the case. So I think that, one of the things that is exciting about Champagne is that Champagne is really, really starting to, well, obviously, remembering its heritage and remembering, what it has done for the world. And every single sparkling producer in the entire world always compares themselves to Champagne. That's
So
a
true.
huge thing. I can go anywhere in the world on a holiday with my husband, and as soon as people find out that like I work in Champagne, they're like, "Oh my God, taste this! Is it as good as Champagne?" So Champagne has this sort of like benchmark status. But as we said before, that can be a bit of a false dichotomy. The appellation is amazing, and they've done so much work over many, many years. And Champagne has suffered more than almost any wine region in the world through wars, through this, and everything we're dealing now with climate change. But I think that now, people are changing the way that champagne is. I mean, people are focusing on, can I make this organic? Can I make this biodynamic? Can I, use less intervention? Can I focus more on this? Maybe I don't need massive gift boxes that are thrown in the trash.
Yes.
Maybe I don't need this. Maybe I don't need this. And that's very recent, but I think it's cool because you see that champagne is changing. And I think that a lot of the sort of younger independent producers have been driving a lot of this change. And I think the houses have listened. I think a lot of the big houses have realized that they need to reframe the way that they communicate, but also reframe their actual values and what they actually represent. And that's quite cool. I think the houses in a lot of ways are starting to act more like the growers, and the growers in some ways are starting to act more like houses. And that's really cool because maybe like there's a happy medium between everything.
Yeah, and but obviously, Champagne is 16,000 or a bit more than 16,000 producers.
Mm.
And the for the CIVC, it has always been, we need everybody needs to come. Now, as a teacher, I was a teacher for a very long time.
Yeah.
I can tell you that, and I only had a class of 25 or 27. Okay, so I'm not talking about about 16,000. It is very difficult because people are at different places. Always, we
Yeah.
all are in different places, and you can bring people to a certain thing, but there's always going to be people that want more, and they're going to be a lot more ahead. And there's always going to be people that do not want to change. There's always going to be people that, you know, um, a lot of people, we need to be honest, in Champagne, up till very recently, um, whether they grow as by the kilo, whether they sell, whether they are, part of a cooperative, they don't go to the vineyards. They have people doing the work for them.
Mm.
They do only the things that they like. And obviously today, this is becoming too expensive because, it's not, it doesn't sell anymore just because of the word champagne.
Mm.
There needs to be a little bit more, that story that you said, the authenticity, the other things. And those people are often very stubborn, as in they do not want to give up or they do not want to look past this uh, this tradition that you said. We've always done it like this. It's always
Mm.
been like this. Therefore, this is just, you do not know how often I hear this. This is not a crisis. Um, Even though we are living in a crisis, they say, oh, well, it's not really a crisis. And Champagne always got out of the crisis, but they don't necessarily go back and see that it took many years to get out of the crisis. Okay. They just think, oh, COVID, we went down, we went up straight away. So this is basically where people think. How do you bring all those people, or how do you bring a lot of those people on board to newer things? Okay, I think
I
there's
think it's
people asking
I
questions.
don't think it's specifically a Champagne issue. I think it's more of an
Please quote.
Appalachian issue. Because I see the same thing in the Interpellation, from all over Europe. You see it everywhere. It's very, very difficult, and I think that the challenge of working at the sort of controlling body of an appellation is it's so difficult because you have to encapsulate so many different people that have different challenges, people that have different sizes, I mean, you literally have to be someone that represents a husband and wife farming 2 hectares, and you have to represent people making 5 million bottles a year. And I think that has to be a really, really challenging job because you
Mm,
have to try and take into consideration where everyone is. And I don't think it's a Champagne specific problem. I think that
no,
it's a problem from all of the Appalachian
all
groups
interprofessionals,
all
yeah.
over, interprofessions. Exactly. Sorry for losing. Interprofessions all over. I think that it's difficult, but I think that the most important thing is that we continue to have open dialogue, honest dialogue, sit down, chill, relax. If we've all attended these meetings, and if two people are like fighting over something, like, go out, chat, like, share a glass of wine, like, relax. Maybe you might be able to figure out that you're actually more on the same page than you think you are. And I think that it's in our nature, I think, as French people, to be a bit confrontational by nature. But I think that stepping back, and there's actually a lot more things that people have like in common. I'm seeing a lot of change, and I'm seeing a lot of like progress, and I think that we need to support, the appellation boards for everything that they've tried to do. At the same time, it's challenging. There's a lot of stuff that, I think we're looking at all over the world. I mean, this year has been, I mean, I've never lived through a summer like this in France. I mean, we've had 3 massive, massive, massive heat waves. We've never
Yeah,
had
and the next one
temperatures this high.
starting.
Exactly. So so I think that, I was talking to a producer from Burgundy last week who was saying, maybe we need to rethink irrigation. Maybe we need to rethink this, rethink this. But it's an interesting conversation to have.
No, I am not against these things. Obviously, in
Mm,
New Zealand, there was
mm,
irrigation. We had
mm.
irrigation. Um, the only problem I can say that I see with irrigation is we have no water. So,
Exactly.
that is the only thing. Um, I have a question here, Christian. Now, I'm going to give you the option to leave because this is something that you don't necessarily, this is what you told me that you did not want to discuss. Okay, I'm just reading the question. It says here, please comment on this year's quota and the large inventories. So, if you prefer not to be involved in this, I'm going to give you the option to go. Otherwise, I'm just going to comment. And if you want, you can comment as well. I I just want to be honest with you. So, we're
No, I
open
appreciate it,
and
but obviously, 8,800 kilos. I mean, is quite historic, in a lot of ways. Obviously, Champagne is in a particular situation at the moment, in terms not only of the confrontation of production and everything that we've seen over the last few years in terms of climate. I think that's very real. Unfortunately, I'm not a export director or a commercial director, so I don't really know how to comment much more than that. But clearly, when we saw the news, I don't think any of us were surprised because we live here and we've been seeing what's been going on. But at the same time, I can see that for a lot of people that work with champagne producers around the world, it's definitely been, you know, upsetting in a lot of ways. What do you
it's
think?
yeah. Basically, for me, because this question might have been for me actually, is I believe 8,800 is the compromise that works for no one. And Maxime Toubar actually said that at the press conference. He said that a good compromise is a compromise which is the thing that nobody's happy with. Now, I wrote in Wine Searcher that I believe that this compromise is not viable. Uh, the hot weather is going to exacerbate that even worse because what we see is we see the yield going down because of the hot weather. So obviously we had the big frosts at the beginning of the year. Even today they say we've got between 8,000, 9,000 average in the vineyards. Sebastian didn't get back to me saying what the minimum or the maximum is because they are still looking. But, the berries, the vines is clearly blocked. Veraison started and stopped as soon as it started. There's a few berries changing, but, it's what we see in hot years. It's not
Mm,
something new. But, next week, they're forecasting temperatures again, around 35 higher, as we get into August. I saw up to 38. I was like, oh my God. So obviously that is not going to be good for this. Part of the reason why we see the yields shrink is that the vine is shut down. It's protecting itself. It's not investing in the berries anymore. So what we will see is we will see these berries being smaller, weighing less, being complicated to press. We need to be honest. So that's
mm,
not going to be that easy. And what I see is that we are now going to draw on a reserve which is going to be needed more and more because of climate change, which
mm,
sits today at 7,200 kilograms per hectare to produce bottles nobody really needs because we have so much in stock.
mm,
So, so it's going to cause even more problems. Obviously they chose 8,800 because a lot of people say it's the minimum that a lot of wine growers need. It's very difficult for people that sell well. There are people, that the ones that do what you say, that look after the environment, look after their people, are very passionate. They are still selling well.
yeah,
It's not because the champagne sales are down that they're down for everybody. This really is not the case. So, for them, obviously, they need to be able to get some stocks in, even though it's probably not enough to, to sustain the sales they're having today. For a lot of the houses, we must not forget that there was a decision passed by the Bureau Executive at the beginning of June that postponed the payments. So the payment of June was not paid. It will go to September. So these are payments for the 2025 grapes. And then the September one will go to November. And now they will have an extra payment on top of it, which will be in December. The only good thing about small yields is that quite a bit will have to be drawn from the reserve, and the reserve you do not pay until after it has been made available. So that's not after January. So that will not be paid till March. But I think that this is going to put a lot of pressure on many players in the appellation. The
mm,
choice was to not. It was a very political choice. It was a choice to keep both families relatively healthy, and I would say instead of relatively healthy, maybe to keep them on, a survival mechanism. But if sales do not pick up, there are going to be a lot of casualties.
mm,
So that's going to be difficult. The stocks, they're there. Some of these stocks, like Jan Road and L'Union, are not there. Some of these wines are not there to age for years and years and years. So, we will have to see what the future brings. I think that this decision, rationally, if I just look at it rationally, I say it's crazy. If I look at it humanly, and we've been talking about humanity here in
mm,
this
mm,
talk,
mm.
I think it's maybe the right decision. Even if my mind doesn't agree, I am a person living in this appellation. I know a lot of people, and obviously we want the best possible solution in a worst case scenario, and maybe that's what it is.
I
I
think,
hope that
we when
answers the
people
question. Sorry, I think it's Tom that asked the question. Sorry. Yes.
Right. I think when people come to Champagne for the first time, let's say consumers that come to Champagne for the first time, they're always really, I've heard this so many times, they're always quite surprised that it's not like, movie stars and these big palaces and everything. And they actually see that, like, it's a very, very
Come to my
agricultural.
house, you will see how little movie stars they are.
I picture it. But and it's fabulous, but it's like, it's a very agricultural, region,
Hmm.
and it's a farming region, and I think that we have to remember that for all the glamour of Champagne, you know, most people are farmers and most people are trying to put food on the table for their
Yes.
families. And most people have, to pay their mortgage and to pay for their children and to pay for school, to pay for this and pay for that. So I think that, it's important to keep that in mind. Um, I do think that this year has been particularly difficult, and we've lived through different difficult years in Champagne before. But I think this year, between the frost and the hail, and the start of the fourth heat wave, I've seen a lot of very, very sort of steady, unflappable winemakers that are quite anxious and quite nervous about everything. So I do think that the big sort of, like, if we step back from everything in terms of the actual Appalachian quota numbers, is that climate change is real, and it's
Yes.
actually really, really, really starting to pick up the pace. When you see the amount, just in the last, 3 weeks, the amount of fires taking place everywhere from Fontainebleau to Corsica to Canada. I mean, forest fires are going everywhere. I mean,
Everywhere. Yeah.
things are really, really, really in a challenging thing. And that's why when I go back to coalitions, I think that, anything that we can do sort of as a global community to help each other mitigate these issues that we're all facing. Because I think that the next few years are gonna be really challenging for a lot of appellations. And I don't think it's only Champagne. I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
regions that are struggling as well.
No, no, I think a lot of regions are struggling, and I think, what we see. I said if the sales don't pick up, and again, if I look with only my brain, if I
Mm.
the very rational head, I don't see them pick up, and that basically means that it will break. Like it has broken in many other appellations in France. And
Mm.
I was speaking to New Zealand winemaker friends of mine in the New World. They are struggling there as well. In America, people are struggling. People are talking
Everyone
about
is.
grabbing up vines in Napa even now. So, I think people are struggling everywhere. And I think maybe so far Champagne has managed to stay on the edge of it, same as it managed up till now to get the benefit of climate change. But maybe now it's being sucked up with everything else. I really do not
At the
know.
same time,
But
we're really resilient in Champagne, and
mm,
I think that, as we know, we've been through a lot in Champagne over many, 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 many years. The wars, structural changes, power shifts. There's a lot of things that Champagne has been through, and the Champenois, they always kind of find a way to come out. So I'm
mhm,
hopeful, and I'm naturally very optimistic. I'm hopeful that, we're gonna um come together and be able to make some changes, not only in the appellation, but also to help everyone in the world. Because you see that, so many different regions are, confronting the exact same issues.
yeah,
Um Media is having very similar issues.
media is
Wineries
having
are having issues. Consumption is having issues.
everybody is
Health.
having everybody's
Yeah.
having issues. But
Are we all?
I think we should end not on the
Right.
issues, but on the positive note that
Yeah.
that you picked up. That hopefully we can be resilient. Champagne can be resilient. You, in your lovely little agency, can be resilient. Me, as a journalist, can be resilient. We're all under threat from, different things. And, hopefully we can be resilient and come out stronger the other way. That's normally uh, what has happened in Champagne. Every crisis, they have reinvented themselves and they have come out stronger. I live in hope because, in general, it has been qualitatively better. So I live in hope that that's where we're going to go. And so, that's, I think, a nice positive message to end on. Is there anything else you would like to add to that?
Just thank you, Carolyn, and it's really an honor to be speaking with you. And I just think you're great. And thank you to everyone that tuned in. This is really nice of you, and I hope everyone has a really nice weekend.
That's it, yes. So thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to the lovely Christian. It was so nice to have you here and, to have this discussion. And I'm actually really happy that the discussion went into the direction of kindness and humanity and coalitions and cooperation because, I think this is really one way of getting stronger and getting better, it's helping to get to the other side in an easier way. Thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend. I'll put this live in a few minutes. I'll type something up what we said, and then that's it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Erin. Bye.
Bye.